Oh boy, I guess we're doing this. I'll start by saying that I'm doing great now, and this entire year has been fantastic, and that's what my next video is going to be about. But the last 3 years, basically since I started the channel, has been heavily shaded by a battle with a pretty severe gambling addiction. I find it a bit weird to talk about because while it obviously sucked and I'm glad it's over, it's not something that feels like noteworthy or something that I identify with particularly. Everyone has periods where they're just kind of lacing about being a potato. I've definitely had my fair share of those. And other than the financial consequences, to me, looking back, it feels like the gambling addiction was just kind of an extended period of low productivity like that. But I notice often when I try to talk about it, even a little bit now, that it does kind of choke me up or make me feel emotional in some way. So even though like sitting here as like the rational agent Jarle analyzing his past experiences, I want to say that it's like no big deal. It happened and now it's over and it sucked, but there's no use crying over spilled milk. But I do think it's somehow left a mark on me. Things were bad, but I think they could easily have been a lot worse. So that's also, I think, why, in part, it kind of spooked me a little. And what I'll talk about is first going through kind of how I started and what the experience was like. Hey guys, Editor Jarle here. The topic is more on the serious side, so I feel a bit conflicted about editing the video. Like this sound effect almost feels like it clashes with the vibe, but it's not like I think this is any better. Anyway, I'll just try to keep the editing engaging and maybe add in some memes or levity, even if the topic is more on the serious side. So with that, let's get back to the video. For me, and then how I was eventually able to quit. And finally, I'll give some more general advice on what I've learned when it comes to quitting addictions, big or small. So why am I making this video? This is something I've thought quite a lot about. I imagine for a lot of people, it feels like one of those things you maybe don't want to put online and permanently attach my name to for all the world to see. But I guess if you're new here, my name is Jarle, and on Early Owl, we don't shy away from talking about difficult or embarrassing things. If this channel is about anything, it's about becoming your best self. And I'm not just sharing information, but I'm also trying to put myself forward as an example of these things in action. But if I only talk about the peaks and never the valleys, I think this will set kind of unrealistic expectations of what a life of progressing towards being your best self looks like. I also think there is kind of a special sauce or whatever to being authentic that people can pick up on. If I just put myself forward as the most fantastically productive person ever, making all the right choices, maybe initially that would lead to some pretty impressive videos and it would seem like I have it all figured out. But I think over time, this would just come across as fake and it's something people can pick up on even if you can't really explain why. While I still feel some kind of latent cringe or shame attached to being sucked into this addiction, more than I feel ashamed, I'm first of all proud of beating it. And even more so, I feel like I'm proud of being able to talk about it openly. Also, I hope this video can help other people struggling with addiction, whether it's gambling or something else. As I'll go through later, one of the biggest parts for myself in being able to quit was just sharing the problem I had with some friends. And on the face of it, this seems like it should be straightforward, but it can be very hard given the amount of stigma and shame that's attached to an addiction or admitting to having this kind of problem. So I'm hoping this video does a tiny bit to alleviate that. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a big inspiration to me in making this video, which is a video PewDiePie put out where he was talking about how he was addicted to whiskey. And this is something he didn't need to put out. It's like not what his channel is about at all. And he could have just kept it to himself. But I think doing something like that helps normalizing talking about these kind of things. And it makes it easier for those who need it to seek help. So basically the way I started is that it became a meta on Twitch, which I used to watch a lot, to stream gambling content, especially online slots, which is what became my poison. So I got introduced to this world from that, and I naively felt like this would be just a way to happily trade some money in for some new avenue of entertainment. For me, this was never about winning any money. I earn enough money and don't care about money in that way. So it's not like I was imagining I could have some big win and then that would meaningfully impact my life. Or well, later it did become a bit more about money because at that point I wanted more money to kind of fuel my addiction. So for the actual experience of the gambling addiction, I have a fair amount of experience dealing with kind of smaller addictions in my life and beating those. So here I'm talking about things like sugar, weed, nicotine. These are things I've at some points in my life been like some level of addicted to, and then I've decided to quit and eventually been able to do it. So I have some experience dealing with these kind of addictions and getting over them. And you would think, since those things are physical things that you're kind of putting inside of your body, that they have a stronger physical component to them. But at least for me, the physical cravings I had for gambling and when I was trying to quit were much stronger than I've had from any of these. I get this like tightness in my chest and it impacted my breathing, and I get like dizzy or lightheaded just like feeling this intense urge to do it. Another thing about the experience of gambling, probably you see this with most addictions, but to me, at least with gambling, this is like one of the most insane parts of it, is this like tendency to be like just one more deposit or whatever, and then I'll be done. And then you just keep telling yourself that over and over and over and over. And it just goes to insane lengths. Like I'll get back to this. It wouldn't be that bad if it was just gambling and like spending some of my time and hard-earned money on it. But all the other kind of negative or self-destructive habits I had got attached to gambling as well. So I would try to start eating healthy or work out or be productive or quit nicotine or something like that. And then that would work for a short period. But then when one of those dominoes fall, which would generally be I started gamble, then all of them did. To lift a little bit under the veil of how online gambling and online slots work, basically you're spinning the slot and then every couple of hundred spins, you get a bonus, and that's kind of the exciting part of the game. Feels so stupid to talk about, but here we are. And what I would do sometimes is I would have this like habit that I would spin the slots until I get a bonus, and then when I got the bonus, I would either take like a snooze, like a nicotine pouch, or smoke a cigarette while doing the bonus. And it just created this like completely insane Pavlovian cocktail of self-destruction and kind of double habit dependency. You would think after I quit gambling, it's just gonna be all sunshine and rainbows, but that's not really the case. Gambling is a hyper-stimulating, high dopamine activity, at least if you're anything like me. And I do feel like the slots have gone through a similar revolution like smartphones and apps have, where they've just ramped up the addictiveness to the nth degree. And I was just hooked on this, doing it a lot for like over a year, which just completely messes with kind of my pre-existing relationship to dopamine. Something that used to be fun and stimulating, like playing a video game, became boring. And something that used to be difficult or challenging or requiring some focus, like working on a video, became excruciating. Before gambling, I was at the best place I've ever been in terms of being focused, diligent, able to match my actions to my intentions. And even though this used to be me and I knew what was possible and I knew how to do it, for a long period after gambling, it was impossible for me to function anywhere close to what I was used to. I remember specifically sitting down to work on, for example, a video at the computer and being like super committed, like, okay, I really need to get something going and start working on something. And I would just end up sitting there staring at the computer, sometimes for hours. And here I don't mean like procrastinating, like going on Reddit or browsing TikTok or whatever. I mean just like opening up a document and just staring at it. Because like the feeling of like trying to get myself to focus was just so uncomfortable that I couldn't do it even if I wasn't doing anything else. I started gambling around April 2021, and I believe I finally quit gambling for good in the middle of 2022. I don't remember exactly when, but I know it was done when I was in Orlando when I filmed my quitting video, so that was like at the end of the year. Throughout 2023, I was in various stages of dopamine zombie recovery, kind of progressively getting better. And then at the start of this year, I finally started to feel close to fully recovered and like I had some space to get all my ducks in a row. So since January 1st, I've been kind of focused on habit tracking and going after my peak performance life. And that's what my next video is going to be about. Looking back at the timeline, it's a bit funny for me to think about. I had a period of like 2 years where I really was very productive and high performing and diligent about all these kind of things. And then I decided to start a channel about productivity and self-development and being your best self and kind of sharing the things I've learned. And then like 2 months after I started posting regularly, I pick up one of the most life-destroying addictions that just comes in like a wrecking ball, fucks up everything, and then all of my kind of positive habits go to shit. It is actually pretty crazy for me to think about how long I was able to keep up with posting weekly videos while also keeping up with work, given how much this ruined everything. This is also why I'm really excited for the future of this channel. I feel like it's gone pretty well so far. I've made some videos that I'm relatively happy with and people seem to like them. But the fact of the matter is that I've basically been able to put in like 20% of the effort that I'm easily capable of. So I'm very excited for what I'll be able to produce when I'm no longer shackled by this. I think I'll first talk a little bit just about my mentality around all of this. I always knew I was going to quit, and I also always wanted to quit. And I do think that maybe is an important point, because to be able to quit something like this, you do have to want it. Like if someone else in your life is struggling with an addiction, there is a lot you can do to help them, but that only works if they want to quit. The question for me was always just about when and how. I was also never in denial. Like I realized very early on that this was clearly an addiction and it was going to start fucking up my life in a big way. And there was never any moment where I was like, oh, I guess I'm just a gambling addict now. Like I always was like, okay, I'm addicted to this now, but we're gonna quit and then it's gonna be okay. Another thing about mentality is that I do put a lot of thought and effort into kind of being deliberate about my actions and making choices that set me the most up for long-term happiness. There's a quote I like a lot and I use it when I can. Never resigning oneself passively to any flaws in one's character. And I think that's core of how I think about self-development as well. If there's any part of my life or myself that I'm not perfectly satisfied with, whether that's my social life, my sleep, ability to focus, emotional connection to others, my mood, how I treat other people, if there's anything in like any of these areas or any other area of my life that I feel like I could be better at, I never passively resign. And the same goes for quitting gambling. I wasn't actively trying to quit every single day, but I never passively resigned to it. I always had like a process running in the back of my head, kind of workshopping different ideas on how to quit, setting different milestones in the future of like, okay, next month, at the start of the month, I'll quit, those kind of things. There were basically two things that eventually made it stick. The first is that I had a minor windfall where I was able to sell some shares from a previous company. This was basically the catalyst to be like, okay, I need to quit now. While I wasn't in a hole so deep I couldn't get out of it, I was in a bit of a financial hole. So on the one hand, it was like a get out of jail free card in the sense I could quit now and then get out of the hole. And on the other hand, it was a pretty big catalyst or motivation to quit because I knew if I don't quit now, all this money is going into the hole and it's just going to get deeper. But even so, with this windfall, I also figured like, oh, I have this money now, so I can maybe gamble a little bit extra before I quit.
Stop it. Get some help.
So while I didn't get away completely unscathed, and for a minute there, it was looking quite bad, but thanks to some lucky circumstances, I was able to catch myself before it went completely off the rails and realized I needed to do something more than just having this windfall. So the second part is that I reached out to two friends. Thank you, Tom and April. And I basically just told them that I had been struggling with gambling addiction for a bit over a year and I was now ready to quit. And then I had this windfall, and if I didn't quit now, it would just be sucked into the hole. So just please give me your accountability and support and check in on me. And that was basically what gave me the strength to quit for good. One final thing I did want to highlight here is that even though this did fuck me up quite good, my circumstances were also very lucky, which allowed me to get away relatively unscathed. As mentioned, I was always going to quit and have this mindset and approach to life very entrenched. If something in my life is not how I want it to be, I just keep trying different things until something sticks. This is something I've cultivated very actively for a long time. So for me, when I'm in this like situation of being addicted to gambling, it comes very natural to just try different and more absurd things to quit gambling until something sticks. Whereas for someone else who's maybe not as used to doing this kind of experimentation on their life, I can see how it might be a lot harder to put the pieces together until you can finally quit. And also worth highlighting that even though I'm saying this, like, oh, I'm so good at improving myself and experimenting with these kind of things, it still took me 1.5 years and like some special conditions to be able to quit. That's another way I got lucky, where I had this windfall, which kind of became the catalyst for quitting. Who knows how much longer I would have been in this hole if I didn't. I was also limited in the hole I was able to easily dig myself into. I had 2 credit cards and their total credit was kind of less than a monthly salary. So even if I maxed them out, it was still something I could recover from quite easily. I'm sure I could have gotten more credit cards to kind of gamble more, but there were a few lines I kind of just knew not to cross. Basically getting more credit to gamble, and the other was taking loans for gambling. But I did skirt those lines a little bit. Like, I didn't take any loans to gamble, but how I'm kind of paying my taxes with how my work tax structure is set up is that I just have to do the taxes myself. And generally you prepay them every month and then you kind of have to make up at the end of the year. But if you don't pay anything, you can't pay them at the end of the year. So for a long period, I was just not paying my taxes like month to month. But then when the tax bill actually came, it was pretty big. So I ended up taking a loan to pay for that. But then when I was already talking to the bank about taking a loan, I was like, okay, I'll take a loan to pay the taxes comfortably and also to pay back all my credit cards. And then also I just want to like give myself a bit of a buffer. Like I'm not going to gamble, but I'll just give myself a bit of a buffer so I have some money since I'm taking this loan anyway. So I took the loan and then obviously I just gambled a bunch of it away right away. Another way I'm lucky is that my job is something I care a lot about and take a lot of pride in, and it's really important to me. And it also comes with a lot of built-in accountability. If I'm one person in like a 5-man team working on some new feature or something, and I know the other people are waiting for me and the company is waiting for me, even if it kills me, even if it's really hard, I'm going to get that shit done. Basically, in terms of my job, I'm kind of limited how far I can fall until everyone notices that something is like very off. But let's say I had a lower paying job that I cared less about, or where I could more easily get fired, and I had less disposable income, and I could more readily get myself into a credit card debt that would take years to pay back. I can easily see how I would have just been completely fucked. Like first maxing out my credit cards, and then probably losing my job. And I think that more than anything is probably what leaves me like the most shook. I was just very lucky to be in the position I'm in, that I could kind of weather this storm and just, now that I'm done with it, just kind of shrug it off. So it sucked for me, but in the grand scheme of things, other than losing those 2 to 3 years, it wasn't that bad, but that's just due to my fortunate circumstances. But if some of these things had been different, I can easily see how it just would completely ravage my life and I would have very little leeway to get back. Like, dealing with this, I feel like I've stumbled over the idea that gambling has the highest suicide rate of any addiction, and I can see why. I guess the reason why I highlight this is that if you or someone you love is struggling with this, take it as seriously as you can, because it can get real bad real quick. To go through some ideas on quitting things generally, when it comes to most addictions, it's not that it's actually hard to quit, it's just that not quitting is so much easier. What I mean by that is that if someone strapped a bomb to me that goes off the moment I did nicotine or gambled or whatever, quitting would be the easiest thing in the world. I probably wouldn't even have any cravings. Another kind of related thing is that the hard part is quitting today. If it's an addiction, you've probably been doing it for some time, so the cost of delaying it one more day is almost always negligible. So when you decide to quit, as soon as it gets a little bit tough, or you have an excuse, or something comes up, it's very easy to decide like, okay, I'm going to quit, but I might as well just quit tomorrow because it's not going to matter. But that cost of one day, even if it's not that much, that one day is also what leads it to being an addiction that lasts months or years. There is a nefarious synergy going on here where the hardest part is to quit today. And also the day that is the hardest when it comes to quitting is the first one. And then the second day is the second hardest. And then from there, it gets progressively easier. And this has like a double effect because as you abstain from the addiction, it has less of a hold on you, and you also have more of a streak to break. So just buckle in for the first couple of days, and then from there, it'll get easier. The hardest day is the first day, and from there it does get easier, but there is one exception, and that is the traps which the addiction lays out for you.
It's a trap.
The better things are going, the easier it is to think you have this under control, and you can make one exception, and it might be okay. From there, all it takes is one stressful moment, or one joyful moment, or one moment where you deserve a reward, one moment of temptation or weakness, and then you make the exception. And making the exception is only half of the trap. Because as soon as you've made one exception, making one more probably isn't that big of a deal. And suddenly, ah shit, here we go again. One way it helps me to think about this is to personify them as something that is tricking me. Like if I get the urge to give in, I'll actively ignore these rationalizations that make it seem like an acceptable idea and instead tell myself like, ooh, here comes the addiction trying to trick me into making a bad choice. I'm not falling for it though, not today. Sometimes I even say this out loud to myself.
Not today.
You'll notice that if someone straps a bomb to you that goes off if you give in to your addiction, all of the problems that I mentioned go away. The date of the bomb becomes the day that you are quitting, so you don't have to worry about doing it today or tomorrow. The first day being the hardest, that just means that it gets easier day by day, and there is no trap or rationalization you could fall into because of the bomb that will still go off. But the problem is, in real life, nobody is strapping bombs to us to quit addictions. So you need to manufacture your own bomb. I hope I'm not getting put on a list for this. So there's kind of 3 strategies or whatever I want to highlight here that I think are worth considering. So you want to leverage catalysts that solidifies that today, right now, is when I'm quitting. Something that draws a line in the sand and in your mind that today is different from a half-assed attempt at quitting. For gambling, my catalyst was the windfall, but you shouldn't rely on an external catalyst like that. It could be just the start of a new month or week or year. It could be watching this video. It could be going somewhere like on a trip or back to see family. It could be some of the consequences of your addiction hitting you in the face. In the same way that a catalyst helps solidify that this time is different, this time I'm actually going to quit, accountability also works. And I do also think there's almost something magical when it comes to quitting and accountability. Like just sharing some of the load with other people, even if they don't have to do anything, just makes it a lot easier. For myself in gambling, opening up to 2 friends about it was enough. Allying yourself with someone else who's quitting alongside you is also a great approach. Depending on your circumstances, going to a support group or your family or seeing a therapist might also be valuable steps. This is from Atomic Habits, the 4 laws of habit change. The first law, Q, make it invisible. Second law, craving, make it unattractive. Third law, response, make it difficult. And then fourth law, reward, make it unsatisfying. And all of these are true and right and good, but how I try to approach it is I say make it impossible. Basically tying yourself to the mast like Odysseus resisting the sirens. I have a video about this already where I mentioned the kitchen safes. Thinking back, I must have made this as I was struggling to quit gambling, which is kind of funny to think about, but I stand by the video regardless. When I put my card and wallet in the kitchen safe, then sure, it's impossible for me to open it up until the timer runs out so I can go buy snacks, but it's not impossible for me to break it. The container costs like 30 bucks, I think, and you feel like a complete idiot when breaking it, which generally is enough for me to not buy snacks, for example, but it's not always enough to keep me from gambling. Like here's one picture from a kitchen safe massacre from this period. This is also an example of the complete insanity you can go to in the kind of just one more mentality. I don't remember specifics here, but I'm sure something like this happened one time or probably several times where I was like gambling, and this generally goes by deposit. So it's like you make a deposit and then you lose it and then you should be done, but maybe you make another deposit. So it's like, I'm doing a deposit, I'm saying, okay, just one more deposit and now I'm done. And then I do that like 4 or 5 times in a row. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm like actually done. I'm done. I'll put my wallet in the kitchen safe and then I'll lock it so I can't deposit anymore, and then I'm done. But then when the deposit is out, I'm like, fuck, just one more. And then I break open the kitchen safe and then do a deposit, and I'm like, okay, but this time I'm for real this time, just one more. And then I put it back into another kitchen safe, lock it, and I'm like, okay, now I'm done. I'm just spending this deposit and I'm done. And then the deposit runs out and I'm like, fuck, just one more. And then I break it up. And that is the kind of insanity you deal with when you're dealing with gambling addiction. And you just have these complete insane rationalizations, like you'll make a deposit and it just goes away right away. So you're like, okay, well, that one didn't count, it was so short. But then you make another deposit and it lasts for a long time. And you're like, well, that one lasted so long. So it's like, now I feel like I'm getting double the value for my deposit. So I should make another one. The general advice is still sound though. And using kitchen safes was a big part of helping me quit gambling as well, even though I did break them open a couple of times. The problem is just that they're not powerful enough to overpower an addiction like gambling on their own. But it is another element that kind of adds friction or adds resistance to doing gambling, together with accountability, together with a windfall, together with everything else. One thing I was very seriously considering, and I probably would have done it if I hadn't been able to quit with my two friends, is to get like an actual safe, like these timed safes you have in like stores where you put the money. So it's like if you get robbed, you can't get the money out. And I think if I had something like that, I would have been able to use that to be able to quit gambling, because when you do that, like all you need is one moment of strength at the start of the day or whatever. And then from there, you just can't get access to your money. Another way to do this, which I also was considering and would have done again if I wasn't able to quit, is just to give a friend like control of all my wallets and control of all of my money and just have them order groceries for me or whatever. Like they can pay my bills. I just don't have access to my money, because when you do something like this, you just kind of take away the option of gambling. Like at that point, it's the same as if the bomb is strapped to you. You no longer have the option to gamble. But when you are dealing with these kind of addictions that can just completely fuck up your life, you do just need to pull in all the stops and just make it absolutely impossible to follow through. As I said, it gets easier and easier each day. So you just need to like completely lock down your system for however long it takes, maybe a couple of weeks until you get through the worst part. And from there, you can kind of start ramping up to a more normal life again. We all have our own journey in life and it's going to have its ebbs and flows. And for me, this gambling saga was a pretty long, like maybe 2.5, 3 year long ebb. But at least I'm happy to announce that this chapter is now closed. And since the start of this year, it's been all flow. And that's what my next video is going to be about. So when that video is out, I'll make sure to link that somewhere here since it's a little bit connected. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around.